Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to take a good hard look at myself as a guitarist. Being able to self-evaluate can really help in development, so I'll share with you my strengths and my weaknesses. Hopefully this can serve as an example for how you might do something similar. To start off, let's look at my rhythm. I recorded an example earlier today. It's a simple strumming pattern done to a click track. Let's see how I do. It sounds pretty good, and if you look at the waveforms, you can see that for the most part, it's pretty close to the beat. I've worked on rhythm a fair bit before, and it's a muscle I continue to exercise when I record stuff for my channel, so I would expect it to be pretty decent. However, let's see if I can expose some of my poor rhythm tendencies. I did the same exercise at half the speed, which is significantly harder. There's more time between each beat, which means I need to rely on my internal time feel twice as much. Here we go. As expected, it's not as tight, and looking at the waveform makes it clear that I have a bit of a tendency to play ahead of the beat. Now I'm going to do an abbreviated self-evaluation today. If I were to dive into all the aspects of my musicianship, this video would be way too long and rather boring. Ideally, I would do the same exercise a number of different times, using different speeds, different picking techniques, different strumming patterns, in order to get an accurate representation of where I'm at. Moving on to improvising and soloing. I recorded two brief solos, both over the same chord progression. The first solo was done off the cuff. I made it up as I went. Let's take a listen and then analyze it. It's by no means terrible, but it sounds unfocused and too noodly for my taste. There's nothing that hooks you in from one phrase to the next and isn't overly interesting to listen to. Okay, now let's listen to the second example. This one, I took some time to compose the solo before playing it. I like it significantly more. I tried to balance the flashy licks with the sustained notes. It's more focused and all in all more interesting than the improvised one. Again, ideally I would do this a lot of different ways with a number of different chord patterns. Next up, let's look at ear training. This is one of those things that I struggled with a fair bit and really had to work on. I went and did a number of different exercises in an ear training program called Aurelia. I won't show you me doing those exercises, that would be terribly boring, but we can look at the results. First, I did interval recognition. The software played two different notes and I had to identify the musical space. 20 out of 20, nailed it on this one. I spent a huge amount of time working on this stuff, so I'm glad I still got it. The next exercise I did was identifying seventh chords, which I got 18 out of 20 right. Looking back, I got a little fat and sassy and didn't focus as much on this as I should have. Next up was extended chords, major 9s, 7 sharp 11s, that kind of thing. I didn't do as well on this one, 15 out of 20, which doesn't surprise me. I don't use these chords nearly as much, and the sounds aren't as solidified in my ear. The last bit of my ear training exercise had the software play a melody which I had to figure out and then write out. Here's what the melody was, and here's what I got. However, I did have to listen a number of times. There's no way I would have gotten it on my first take. It also makes it easier since all the notes are diatonic. If you want to work on ear training, I've got a video on that very subject. Please feel free to check it out. Okay, next is theory. I'm going to skip over this one pretty quick. Theory has always been my bread and butter, and I feel pretty confident with it. To test this, I might have Googled up some theory quizzes, see how I did, or alternatively, watch some videos on music theory and see if I understand them all. But let's move on to something I'm less comfortable with. Technique. This is a fairly broad topic, and you wouldn't want to spend too much time practicing a technique that you never use. For me, that would be stuff like sweeping. Alternate picking, however, is a technique that I would use, so let's see how fast I can play a line with 3 notes per string. I recorded this earlier today, let's see how I did. That was at 70 beats per minute. It felt pretty comfortable. I could definitely do it faster. 80 beats per minute, still sounding okay. Let's go up. Okay, so at 100 beats per minute, I'm starting to notice it fall apart a bit. That seems to be my threshold. I wouldn't consider myself an overly technical player, so this would definitely be an area I'd like to improve. If I wanted to do that, I would take exercises like this one, play it extremely slow with perfect technique. I'd bring it up to my threshold now and then, but the bulk of my practice would be developing good habits at a slow speed. I've only looked at one alternate picking pattern, ascending up the scale. If I were to do a more detailed analysis, I'd also do a descending pattern. I would do 2 notes per string, skip over strings, and as many other variations as I can come up with. The more ways I can address a problem, the closer I'm going to get to a solution. Alright, let's move on to some sight reading, and I can tell you right now, this is going to be rough. I randomly picked a passage from this book, put the metronome on, and tried to read it. Let's see how I did. Obviously, that got off the rails near the end there. I'm not a good sight reader, it's a muscle I've never had to develop. However, if you're into jazz, classical music, or musical theater, this stuff is pretty important. So to wrap this all up, I'll touch on a couple strengths and weaknesses I haven't yet addressed. One of my weaknesses right now would probably be playing live or in a band. I haven't done either of those things nearly as much since I started focusing on YouTube. Growing up, it was a huge part of my development, and I definitely do miss it. I can only imagine that since I haven't done it as much, it would take a little bit to get back in the swing of things. Come the day I take this samurai guitarist thing on the road for live events or clinics, I'm definitely gonna put in some time getting my chops back in shape. Another weakness is I can't sing backups for the life of me. If I was pursuing session work, I would definitely need to get better at that. Another thing is I don't have a lot of musical ideas on the backlog. When I go to make original music, I'm usually starting from scratch, which can be pretty tough. Ideally, I would spend a couple minutes every day making something up and recording it on my phone, musical brainstorming. That way, when it's time to write, I can tap into all those ideas instead of working from nothing. And to pump my ego a little bit, let's move on to my strengths. I think my biggest strength lies in creativity. I can usually conceptualize an idea pretty clearly and then come up with an end product I'm proud of. I also think that when I do compose solos, my phrasing and melodic sense is pretty strong. And having spent a fair bit of time with music, I feel pretty confident letting my musical instincts guide me. If I were to summarize myself in a few words, I would say highly competent, has good ideas, but definitely not on the same echelon as the true greats. Anyways, enough about me. I would recommend that everyone does these types of analyses on themselves. It can help you shape your goals and guide your practice so that you're getting the most out of your time. And how about to let me know you've made it all the way through this video, leave me a comment and tell me what you think your greatest strength and your biggest weakness is. Thank you all for watching, and a big thank you to everyone who supports my channel through Patreon. New videos Mondays and Thursdays, so hit that subscribe button if you're new here. I'm Samurai Guitarist. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you again soon.